The unstoppable conquerors, the Dravic Empire, was feared by all. For centuries, their fleets had spread across the stars, crushing anyone who dared resist. Their warships were vast, their weapons unmatched, their armies endless. Entire civilizations had vanished beneath their shadow. On every world they conquered, the same message was whispered: no one can challenge the Drava. The galaxy had learned to bow. Empires surrendered before the first shot was fired. Colonies paid tribute to survive another day. Even proud warrior races bent their knees, knowing resistance only meant death. The Dravic fed on fear. It was their greatest weapon, and fear had never failed them. On the colony world of Varos, the skies burned red. The Dravic came without warning. Dozens of their warships descended through the clouds, their cannons tearing cities apart. Towers collapsed, fires spread across the streets, and screams filled the air. The defenders of Varos fought bravely, but their ships were nothing compared to the Empire's might. Within hours, their fleets were destroyed, their ground armies scattered. In the capital square, survivors huddled together, watching the black silhouettes of Dravic warships blot out the sun. There was no hope. There never was. On the bridge of the Dravok flagship, Commander Varric stood tall, his cold eyes scanning the battlefield. "Another world falls," he said. His voice carried no emotion, only certainty. "Resistance?" asked one of his officers. Varric sneered. "Broken, as always." He turned to the great display screen showing the burning cities below. "Send the message to the galaxy. Varos has joined the Empire. Let them all remember no one can stand against us." The officers bowed their heads. Fear kept them loyal. Fear kept the galaxy silent. But as the last defenders of Varos prepared for death, something strange happened. A new signal appeared on the scanners, faint at first, small, unfamiliar. The Dravok officers frowned. Another colony ship, a straggler trying to flee. Commander Varric studied the reading. The vessel was large, heavily armed, but not of any empire he recognized. Its design was differential per lines, strange weapon placements, a hull built for war, but unlike the Empire's style. He narrowed his eyes. "Identify it." The reply came quickly, "Unknown." But its transponder matches human coding. A silence filled the room. "Human," Varric repeated, his voice cold. "Terrans." The officer nodded nervously. Varric's lips curled into a smile. "Then let this be a lesson for them too." The Terran warship entered the battlefield slowly, its engines burning bright against the black sky. It carried no allies, no support. Fleet, only one ship, facing an Empire's armada. From the surface of Varos, survivors watched in confusion. They had heard whispers of humanity, an ambitious young race on the edge of the galaxy, but never had they seen a human warship stand. Against the Dravic, the hopeless people lifted their eyes, wondering, was this salvation, or just another death to watch? On the Dravic flagship, officers laughed. "One ship against us. They must be mad. They will fall faster than the rest." Varric raised his hand. The laughter stopped. "Crush them," he ordered. The Dravok fleet turned, weapons charging, ready to erase the Terran ship in a single volley. But on the Terran vessel, the crew moved with calm precision. Their captain, an older man with steel in his voice, gave the order. "Target locked, fire." The first strike came from the Terran ship. A beam of white fire tore through the void, slamming into a Dravic cruiser. The enemy ship shuddered, its shields collapsing instantly. A second shot ripped through its hull, splitting it apart in a flash of light. The Dravik officers froze, one of their cruisers destroyed in seconds. That should not be possible, one stammered. But the Terran ship did not stop. Its guns thundered again, missiles streaked into the fleet, explosions lighting up the battlefield. The unstoppable empire had just been stopped. On the surface, the people of Veros gasped. The Dravik, they are retreating. Who are they? What ship is that? Word spread quickly. A Terran battleship had entered the field, and it was winning. Commander Verak's smile faded, replaced with fury. Bring the fleet around. He roared, destroy them. I will not allow this insult. But even as the Dravok regrouped, the truth had already broken through. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy had seen something impossible. The Dravok were not invincible. They could be challenged, and it was humanity who had done it. As the battle raged, whispers spread beyond Veros. Traders carried the news, spies reported to their masters, and frightened rulers leaned close to their advisors. The Dravak bled, they whispered, and it was the Terrans who made them bleed. The galaxy trembled, and the war had only just begun. The Terran defiance, the Dravik Empire had never been forced to fight twice for the same victory. When they entered a battlefield, the outcome was always certain. They crushed, they burned, and they moved on. But now, above Veros, their fleet hesitated. One Terran warship stood before them. Alone, Commander Verak glared at the display, his teeth bared in rage. One human ship humiliates us before the galaxy. Destroy them. I want the wreckage scattered across this system. His officers obeyed, their claws flying across the controls. Dozens of Dravik warships surged forward, weapons primed, their firepower enough to erase entire cities. But the Terran vessel did not flinch. Inside the warship, resolute, the human crew moved with cold focus. No panic, no fear. Their captain, Admiral Joran, stood tall on the bridge. His voice was calm, steady, almost quiet. Hold formation, lock targets, show them what it means to fight humans. The Dravok fired first. Red lances of energy cut through the void. Missiles streaked like falling stars, and plasma bursts roared toward the Terran ship. The people on Veros cried out, convinced their savior would vanish in fire. But then flared. The Resolute shuddered, but held, its armor glowing as it absorbed the blasts. The crew gritted their teeth, hands steady on their controls, shields at 60%. A lieutenant reported. Admiral Joran's eyes narrowed. Return fire. The Resolute answered with fury. Railguns fired at impossible speed, shells slamming into enemy hulls, punching holes through armor. Missiles launched in perfect waves, striking weak points the Dravik didn't even know they had. 2 cruisers fell in seconds, their wreckage spinning into the void. A destroyer tried to flank, but the Terran ship twisted faster than its size. Should allow, unleashing a broadside that tore the smaller ship apart. For the first time in living memory, the Dravik fleet faltered. On the ground, survivors of Veros cheered through tears. They fight back. The Dravik are losing. Humanity stands against them. Children who had only known fear lifted their eyes to the skies, watching the lone Terran vessel hold its ground against an empire. The Kareth refugees, enslaved by the for generations, whispered to one another, the humans do not bow. Perhaps neither should we. But the Dravik were not finished. Varric slammed his fist against the command rail. Enough games. Encircle them. Tear that ship apart Piece by piece, the Dravik fleet moved in unison, surrounding the Resolute. Cannons fired from every angle, waves of energy slamming into its shields. The Terran ship groaned under the pressure, sparks flying across its bridge, shields at 30%. The lieutenant shouted, engines strained, damage in Sector 7. The Dravak laughed across the comms. You humans fight well, but now you die. But Admiral Joran only smiled faintly. Not yet. He gave the order. Initiate. Strike pattern Valkyrie. The crew moved as one. Engines roared, pulling the ship into a sudden spin, slipping between enemy fire. Hidden panels opened along its hull, revealing weapons the Dravik had never seen before. Dozens of drones launched, each carrying explosive charges. They streaked through the battlefield, weaving between enemy ships, bypassing shields with precision. The Dravik officers froze. What are these? The drones detonated in unison. 5 Dravik warships exploded, torn apart by blasts from within their armor. The Empire's fleet shuddered. Fear spread for the first time in their ranks. The crowd erupted. Hope spread like fire. The Dravik were not untouchable. They could bleed. They could fall. Elder Kareth prisoners, long broken, felt their hands tighten into fists. One whispered, the humans fight like no other. They fight as if every strike carries their soul. But victory came at a cost. The Resolute shook violently. HULL plates tearing. Fires broke out across its lower decks. Dozens of human crew were dead, and more fought desperately to keep systems alive. Shields collapsing. We cannot take another volley. Admiral Joran stood unshaken, though his ship was burning around him. His voice carried across the bridge. If this is where we end, then let it be known the Dravok did not break us. We stood and we fought, and the galaxy will remember. The Dravik flagship prepared its killing blow. Energy gathered along its massive cannons, enough to shatter a moon. But before the shot could fire, the Resolute launched its last striken, overcharged railgun slug, accelerated to impossible speed. The projectile tore through the flagship's main cannon, detonating in a burst of fire that crippled the weapon. The Empire's pride was broken. Varric roared in fury. Retreat, never. We are the Dravok. But his officers hesitated. Fear crept into their voices. Commander, if we continue, we may lose the fleet. The Terran ship is different. For the first time, doubt entered the Dravak's iron. Command, on the surface of Veyros silence fell. The battle was not over, but something had already changed. The Terran ship still floated, scarred but alive, surrounded by wreckage of an Empire's fleet. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy had seen defiance against the unstoppable conquerors, and that defiance carried a name. Humanity, asterisk. Fire in the void, the battle above Veyros should have ended quickly. One Terran ship should have been nothing against the Empire's fleet, but the Resolute still floated, scarred and burning, yet alive. Around it drifted the wreckage of Dravik warships, proof that the impossible had happened. The Empire had bled. On the bridge of the Dravok flagship, Commander Verac's fury shook the room. One human vessel humiliates us before the galaxy. He roared, send for reinforcements. I want them erased. His officers obeyed. Messages spread through subspace, summoning more ships. Soon, the void around Veyros shimmered with the arrival of fresh Dravok reinforcements, cruisers, destroyers, carriers. Dozens more warships entered the field. The Empire would not retreat. They would crush the Terrans with overwhelming fire. Inside the Resolute, alarms screamed. The hull was scarred, shields weakened, weapons overheating. Crew members carried wounded from the flames, while engineers worked desperately to keep the engines alive. Reinforcements inbound, a lieutenant shouted. Too many, far too many. Admiral Joran's voice was calm, though the bridge trembled. Then we fight until our last breath. Humanity does not run. The Dravik fleet opened. Fire, the void lighting up with red lances of energy. Plasma bursts and missiles rained from every angle. The Resolute twisted through the storm, shields flaring, armor melting under the strain. Its guns thundered in reply, railgun slugs tearing through an enemy destroyer, missiles slamming into a cruiser's engines. The humans fought with precision, every strike aimed to cripple, not waste. But for every enemy that fell, more arrived. The sky itself seemed to burn. From the surface of Veyros, survivors watched the impossible battle above. Children clung to their parents, eyes wide with hope and fear. The Kareth slaves, long broken, stared in awe at the lone human ship that refused to yield. One Kareth elder whispered, "They fight not to live, but to show us how to live." Inside the Resolute Mira, a young weapons officer fired until her hands bled. Sweat ran down her face, but her voice was steady. "Target down," she cried as another enemy vessel broke apart. Beside her, her commander shouted, "We can't hold this forever." Myra's eyes burned with fire. "Then let the galaxy see us burn. Let them see the Dravik can be stopped." Her words carried across the crew, a spark in the darkness. The Dravik flagship unleashed its full arsenal. Cannons roared, missiles struck, and finally the Resolute shuddered. A section of its hull tore open, atmosphere venting into the void. Dozens of humans were lost in seconds. Admiral Joran gripped the rail, his jaw tight, sealed the breach. "Keep firing." The crew obeyed. Not one faltered, not one turned from their stations, but the Terran fight had already spread beyond the ship, across the galaxy. Enslaved races tuned their secret receivers, listening to whispers of the battle. They heard the impossible, a single human warship, standing against the Empire's fleets, and something awoke inside them. On mining colonies, slaves paused in their work, eyes burning with new fire. On prison worlds, captives whispered in the dark, "If the humans fight, so can we." On hidden stations, old resistance fighters raised their weapons once more. The spark of rebellion had been lit. The Dravik, blind in their pride, did not see it yet. They only saw the lone Terran ship and believed it was still prey. But this prey carried more than guns. It carried defiance. It carried hope, and hope was spreading faster than fire. Back in the battle, the Resolute prepared its last stand, shields at 5%, engines failing. "We cannot hold much longer." Admiral Joran stood tall, his uniform scorched, his voice unshaken. "Then let every shot count. Let history remember that humanity did not bow." The Resolute launched its final volley. Missiles streaked through the void, railguns thundered, beams carved through enemy ships. One Dravid carrier erupted into flames. Another broke apart under the relentless assault. Even as the Terran vessel crumbled, it still struck like a lion refusing to die. On the surface of Veyros, the Kareth fell to their knees, tears streaming down their faces. For generations they had believed the Dravik unbeatable. Now they watched as a single Terran ship defied them. One Kareth warrior rose, lifting his rusted blade, If the humans bleed for us, then we will bleed for them. Others followed, raising weapons, voices strong. For the first time in years, the Kareth prepared to fight in the Dravik War Council. Far from the battle, spies reported the impossible truth. The humans resist, they said. The humans defy. The council sneered. Then we will crush them with more fleets. But already, rebellion stirred. The Empire's grip was cracking. Above Veros, the Resolute still burned, but it had not fallen. The Dravik commander's rage grew into fear. For the first time, his officers dared to whisper the unthinkable. What if they cannot be broken? The void burned with fire, but the message was already clear. The Dravik could be fought. The Dravik could be challenged, and humanity had lit the spark. The galaxy would never be the same again. Asterisk, the turning point, the void above Veros, was littered with wreckage. Dravik warships drifted in flames, their hulls torn apart by weapons they had never seen before. But still, the Resolute fought alone, surrounded, scarred, and burning. Inside the Terran ship, alarms screamed. Fires roared across the lower decks. Crew members carried the wounded through smoke-filled halls, their hands black with ash. Shields are gone, a lieutenant cried. Weapons at half strength. We can't hold much longer. Yet no one abandoned their post. On the bridge, Admiral Joran stood tall, his face lit by the fire of battle. Then we hold with what we have. Let them see Terrans do not break. On the Dravok flagship, Commander Verak's fury boiled into unease. This ship should be ash by now, he snarled. And yet they fight still. Why? What do they gain? One of his officers whispered, They fight not for victory, Commander. They fight for defiance. To show the galaxy the Dravik are not invincible. Varak struck the officer to the ground, but his words lingered. For the first time in his life, the commander tasted doubt. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread. Traders whispered in hidden ports, smugglers carried tales to distant colonies, and enslaved races listened in secret. The words were always the same. A Terran ship stands against the Empire. The Dravik bleed. The conquerors can be challenged. On mining worlds, slaves looked to the sky with fire in their eyes. In prison camps, prisoners clenched their fists, daring to dream of freedom. The spark of rebellion had been lit, and it burned brighter with every passing hour. Back on Veros Kareth, survivors gathered in the ruins. They had once been broken, hopeless, certain that nothing could defy the Empire. But now, as they saw the Terran ship still fighting above, something changed inside them. Elder Roll, a scarred warrior, raised his voice. For years, we said no one could stand against the But look above you. Humanity stands. Alone, they face what we never dared to face. If they bleed for us, will we hide in silence, or will we rise? The Kareth roared as one, lifting weapons, their voices strong. The old fear that had chained them shattered. For the first time in generations, they chose to fight. The Dravik reinforcements pressed harder. Missiles rained, plasma cannons burned, and the Resolute groaned under the assault, weapons failing. Hull breach on Deck 7. But Admiral Joran did not falter. Target their command ship, he ordered. If we fall striking at their heart. The Terran guns thundered one last time. Railgun slugs slamming into the Dravak flagship. Its shields flared, cracking under the pressure. Flames spread across its hull. The Empire's pride was wounded. And then it happened. Out of the void, faint signals appeared. At first, the Terran crew thought it was more Dravik reinforcements. But as the ships drew closer, the truth became clear. They were not Dravik. They were Karth, old vessels, scavenged from junkyards, barely holding together. But they came in numbers, dozens of ships, painted with the broken star of their people. They sent one message across the coms, their voices fierce: "We fight with humanity." The Dravik fleet faltered. They had expected one enemy, not two. The Kureth ships, weak alone, swarmed together in tight formations, striking with speed and fury. Guided by Terran tactics, they tore into enemy flanks, forcing the Dravok to scatter. On the ground, Kareth fighters rose from the ruins, ambushing Dravik soldiers with human weapons. Together, humans and Kareth turned the city into a trap. Every street a battlefield. The galaxy watched in disbelief. The Dravik, conquerors of countless worlds, were being pushed back. Varric roared in rage. Crush them all. Burn this planet to dust. But his officers hesitated. Their fleet was bleeding, their numbers falling. And the Kareth fought with a madness the Empire had never seen before. They should be broken. One whispered, "But humanity has made them strong." Inside the resolute mirror, the young weapons officer wiped blood from her brow. She smiled faintly as Kareth ships flashed across the screen, firing alongside them. "They're fighting," she whispered. "They're really fighting." Admiral Joran nodded, his voice steady. "This is only the beginning. Today we stand. Together, tomorrow the galaxy will rise." The battle raged for hours. Ships exploded in brilliant fire. The skies above Veros burned with light and smoke. But when the sun rose again, the impossible had happened. The Dravik fleet retreated, not in order, not in pride, but in chaos. Their flagship limped away, its hull scarred, its commander silent. The Empire had tasted something new. Defeat on the ground, survivors gathered in the capital square. Kareth warriors stood beside human soldiers, their weapons raised high. Elder Rahl spoke loudly, his voice carrying through the ruins. "For years, we believed we were forgotten, but humanity showed us we are not. We were slaves, now we are fighters, and this is not the end, it is the beginning." The Kareth shouted in unison, their voices shaking the ruins. Together, 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 far across the stars. Rulers of other empires listened to the news with unease. The Dravik had been defied, humanity had stood against them, and the forgotten Kareth had risen again. The galaxy was changing, the age of fear was ending, and at its hearts stood humanity. Spark that lit the fire. Asterisk, the fall of fear. The Empire had always been a storm that no one could stop. But now, for the first time, the storm trembled. The Dravik fleet had been pushed back from Veros. Their ships burned, their pride bled, and their enemies, the humans and the Kareth, stood together, unbroken. But the Empire was not finished. From the depths of space, the Dravik flagship arrived. It was the largest warship the galaxy had ever seen, 10 times the size of the Terran Resolute, its hull black and scarred with countless victories. Its cannons glowed with the power to destroy continents. Its arrival cast a shadow across the stars. The galaxy held its breath. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Joran stood tall, his crew silent as the enemy Colossus appeared on their scanners. "Here it is," he said quietly. "The monster they fear, the symbol of their power, the ship that made the galaxy bow." He turned to his officers, his eyes burning with fire. "If we break it, we break their fear." Commander Varax stood at the heart of the Dravik flagship. His fury now sharpened into determination. "These humans humiliated us," he growled. "These Kareth dared to rise. Today, we end it. Today, the galaxy remembers why we are conquerors." The order was given. Cannons charged. Engines roared. The final battle began. The void exploded with fire. The Dravik flagship unleashed beams of energy that cut through space. Like blades, smaller Kareth ships vanished in bursts of flame. Human escorts were torn apart by missiles. But the Terrans did not retreat. The Resolute led the charge, weaving between blasts, its railguns thundering. Each shot struck the flagship's armor, shaking the giant, leaving scars on its hull. Kareth fighters swarmed around it, striking weak points, distracting its weapons. The galaxy watched as giants clashed in the dark. On the surface of Via, survivors huddled together, staring at the burning skies. They prayed not to gods, but to the Terrans and Kareth who carried their hope. "Don't let the humans fall," one whispered. "They fight for all of us," said another. For the first time, the Forgotten believed in tomorrow. The battle dragged on. The Resolute shook violently, flames pouring from its decks. Entire sections were lost. Crew members sacrificed themselves to keep weapons online. "Admiral, we cannot take another hit," an officer cried. Joran's voice was calm but unyielding. "We will not stop. If this is where we fall, then we fall breaking their chains." Inside the Kareth fleet, Elder Roll gave his people their first true command. Strike with them. Strike for every slave, every child, every world they burned. Strike for freedom. The Kareth roared and threw themselves at the flagship, their ships darting like wolves at the giant's throat. The Dravik flagship's guns turned, trying to swat them away. But every time it aimed, the Resolute fired again, hammering its shields. The monster was bleeding. Finally, Admiral Joran gave the order that would decide it all. Prepare the spear. The Resolute's main railgun, damaged and unstable, was overcharged beyond safe limits. If it fired, it could destroy the enemy flagship or tear itself apart. The crew did not hesitate. Energy built across the weapon, shaking the ship to its core. Sparks burst across the bridge. Systems screamed warnings, and then fire. A single slug tore through the void at impossible speed. It struck the Dravok flagship's heart, shattering its main reactor. The explosion lit the stars, brighter than a sun. The Empire's pride, their unbroken symbol of fear, was gone. Silence followed. The remaining Dravik ships faltered. Commanders shouted in panic. Some fled into hyperspace. Others powered down their weapons, refusing to fight. The unthinkable had happened. The Dravik had lost. On the bridge of the Resolute, cheers erupted, though many wept as they looked at the empty seats of fallen comrades. The ship was scarred, burning, but alive. Admiral Joran's voice was quiet, heavy with pride. Transmit the message. Across the stars, humanity's words echoed. They dominated every battlefield. But when they faced us, they fell. The age of fear is over. The galaxy is free to rise. On Veros, the Kareth raised their banners beside the Terran flag. Children cheered in the streets. Survivors wept in each other's arms. Elder Raoul lifted his voice for all to hear. Humanity stood when no one else dared. Humanity gave us back our hope. From this day forward, we fight not as slaves, not as broken, but as allies. Together, we are free. Far away, in the halls of the Empire, silence spread like poison. The Dravok, who had ruled through fear, now felt that fear themselves. Whispers spread across the galaxy. The Terrans stood. The Carith rose. The Dravik are not gods. The age of conquest was ending, and a new age was beginning. An age lit by the fire of humanity, as the stars burned quietly once more. Admiral Joran stood at the bridge, his gaze on the endless dark. "We are small," he whispered, "but together we are unstoppable." The crew bowed their heads, the Carith raised their weapons, and the galaxy, for the first time in centuries, believed in hope, because the Dravak's greatest weapon fear had fallen, and in its place stood a new truth. When humanity enters the battlefield, no tyrant is safe.